His publisher, Griswold, came down so hard on Edgar Allan Poe after his demise that it was virtually impossible for a long time to extricate Poe from the rather dour reputation that Griswold gave him. Now, one of the mysteries of Poe's death, I'm told, was that he was asking for someone named Reynolds. Reynolds is an infamous street in Pittsburgh full of strange people and tales of mystery seem to issue from Reynolds in a way that is macabre to the point of Hollywood's gold mine, rummaging the symbols and logos available to them to use to sow dread and difficulty. But what we don't know about hybrid situation, as it's called, hybrid militia actions, hybrid gangsters, organized crime versus organized crime from the highest levels of secret government, is what really is being communicated and by who. And to what degree are those who are charged with investigating, with monitoring, with being aware of, with stopping, with intercepting, with diplomatically ameliorating and stopping and reducing the impact of these shenanigans on our civics is also something that's unknown to us. Happy burgers, serfs, men of the people have come up with ways of explaining these things. Federal Reserve mysteries, the Bavarian Illuminati, money bags, military industrial complexes, merchants of death, CIA mafia entanglements, James Bond movies. But it's a way of not understanding. It's a way of giving form to something that we can then shrug off. What I'm interested in trying to do is communicate a little bit of my encounter with the notoriety of being evaluated by Her Majesty's um, government prosecuting attorney operating on Scotland Yard for the terrible sin of interviewing Peter Gabriel for a campus newspaper. I knew, of course, somewhere in the background of my mind, it didn't really explain itself to me. You have to understand that it's difficult to assess how men of the world identify a person's whereabouts when there's someone like me who was only interested in poetry. You see, I saw Robert Fripp as an artisan man looking at artisans. And I was concerned about my poetry. They seemed capable of teaching. I didn't want a bog blast of egoism about it from them. I wasn't expecting that either. I wanted to be welcome in the presence of people who I didn't consider my enemies. I admired their work. It's not that hard to understand, so I interviewed one of them. And I was troubled. So I told them some things that had happened as carefully as I knew how. Um, the conjuring of the imagination that came from Hollywood was both presidential and deviant, and provocative, sad, scary, and obscure. And Louis Lapham put it with the grimace of a true hard boiled wise beard and malice, that to not know of a crime is one. And they used abortion as a metaphor. You don't know that abortion is murder, then all the more evil upon you. Well, what does this have to do with me anyway? I didn't legalize it. I'm not the one who brainwashed me into being a loose screw as a juvenile. So what happened was loathsome. The cowards came after me when the AIDS attack happened and wanted to make it an absolute issue. You must die of AIDS or you must stop entirely and accept sin. I was like, what gives with this imbroglio? It's rather perverse and strange. I didn't think for a second that the lyrics of The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, which were glorifying rape and castration, street violence, and contagious diseases, were actually the mind of a maniac working with the secret military. I associated Peter Gabriel with Amnesty International, with the arts. And there's no way around these truths. They weasel and tunnel and they hotwire and they throw numbers and names and angles and threats and terrorism all the time at me. They associate me with terrible events. But we all live through those terrible events. People say things, they do things, but they're not necessarily involved. People don't know what to say about them. A lot of people see themselves as distant from the world's most important things. They just want to live their lives. They're ordinary people. My situation was so hapless, I suppose you could put it. And when I used incognito on the album So, without warning, without remuneration, in a very scurrilously attended vein, it never occurred to me that the union would get upset, that Paul McCartney would listen, know who I was. It never occurred to me. Amanda Harcourt, Peter Gabriel's personal assistant for the Broadway musical Hair, who were apparently really cold-blooded assassins. I mean, I hate to say that. I didn't suspect that at the time, but everything that's happened since shows it. Said name drop Joni Mitchell. I was like, well, what's Joni Mitchell? Yeah, that's nice you had lunch with Joni Mitchell. And she was like, I guess I was rather haughty. I didn't know enough about language to say, like, Peter Gabriel was implying I'd rather have a haughty than spend an afternoon discussing Lord Byron with Robert Fripp. I wasn't that interested in Peter Sinfield. Who knew that he was going to call Roger Waters and Putin and sell them carrot tapes from, what's that mean, Jaime? What's that mean, Jaime? And who's Betty and all the other little um, feuding garage rocker situations around the burg? Never occurred to me. Yoko Ono, the season of trucking machines is like the season of glass, right? That was one of their phrases. It never occurred to me that Yoko Ono was paying any attention to this stuff. Why should she? Why would they? Zappa, maybe. I mean, I got his autograph as a little kid once early in the morning. But why would they care? Always doing was trying to learn something about writing and from people who seemed to know the business a little better. Oh, I may have said something foolish, like, let me know if there's a publisher, but it was just to be cheeky to show that I wasn't afraid. When she said, was reading your story and I didn't give it to Peter when he asked because it was mine, all mine. Peter Gabriel implying I wanted to spend time with his hotties. I didn't care about his hotties. I wasn't afraid for him to read my work. Is that a crime? And then they're like, well, you're inside out. And it turns out they've implanted a neuroplasm full of horrible memories that I couldn't even access. And it comes vomiting out of me like a bursting exorcist system. And it's all hardwired into a persona of me as someone who was associated with World War II's finale. I never liked the grand finale that was too loud and the thunder clapping at the point. What are they picking on me for? It's absurd. And yet, pick on me they do. They hardwire in this, they hardwire in that. They must have a real, you know, weird love hate thing going where they would castrate an innocent person and then say, we want your autograph. It's extremely strange behavior by the aristocracy. Now, one explanation might be that nobody in their right mind, given the nuclear channels that have been developed by the Cold War Tyrannosaurus rexes that were around gargoyling through the 50s, wants anything to do with such a decision making process that might lead to Armageddon and the eradication of the human species. Nobody does who has any sense. That the result is that nobody who has any sense ends up in power. A few honorable men like Biden come forward and say, I think I can handle it and I know I can do a better job than some clowniac. But does he? I mean, we call people names. It's like Griswold insulting Poe. Every time one superpower talks about the other superpower, it's like Griswold talking about Poe. Distortions and bad blood, and never a word of credit for the other person who deserves credit sometimes. I mean, look at the Hermit Kingdom, the one the people are most hysterical about. They survived on their own after an occupation by the Axis. There's a lot of problems in the world: hunger, global warming, artificial intelligence circuits, this hybrid zania thing that's going on. I've become aware of these things, sure. But attributing them to me does not mean that I was involved. There's a film called Faust about a book by Gustav Gründgens, I guess it was, or it's about Gustav Gründgens, a German actor, written by um, one of Tom Mont's children, the one who committed suicide, his son. And in the film, he says, I'm only an actor, I'm only an actor. Well, I've always stood up and said, I oppose fascism. Nobody's ever mistaken that about me. I don't encourage it. I don't like it. I've always been proud of my father's stand and service against it. I've always attended the memorial service in Chinatown where they honor the Chinese American World War II veterans. An area of town that has seen its share of anti Asian hate crimes, quite unjustly. It's unjust to call me a bigot. I admire my black peers so much that it sometimes embarrasses them. So they back off. Some kind of pushover, some kind of fithy. It's unjust to call me anti Semitic for telling the truth about organized crime from the Israelis because when I thought it was just me who they hurt, I swallowed it and just took it and accepted it and moved on because of what they had been through. They were very persuasive in making that justification and argument. Not anymore. Not now when I see all they've done. You say, well, we can't stop them. We need to be reasonable and behave maturely. It's clear that fascism has me staked out. But it's a dishonorable thing to do to put off on somebody who thinks that they had nothing to do with. And one of the things they try to do is they try to say, well, you have sympathies for the devil in the matter. And they invent sympathies for the devil in the matter. What's wrong with their minds that they're so poisoned that they can't just accept that somebody came to them as a poet looking to improve their poetry? What's wrong with their minds that they can't accept that? What's wrong with their minds that they would forces impinging on the persona's experience? They wrote, the persona is subjected. That's what they said. Subjected to successive degradations of the ex motive. There's a line in I Am the Walrus, which is what they called this macabre horror. Man, you should have seen them kicking Edgar Allan Poe. And Greg Carl put in right on time the phrase a brutal fortissimo pounding. Woo! And they used to call themselves the Eggmen. You know, I used to have notes about what contempt they had for the Beatles. Well, Ringo Starr took up with them like they were holy because they had lots of money and they were willing to sell him anything he needed to use me for the foulest things he could possibly think of, conjure. Why would I care if they were contemptuous of the Beatles if I wasn't trying to defend the Beatles from their contempt? It doesn't make sense. But it's holy gospel when you come to these so-called top sacred sergeant maniacs, and you can't reason with them. They pop off what they call indelible spirits. Are we supposed to pretend they're not doing it? We talk about transparency in government, and we're not even willing to be transparent about an issue that profound and assertive on our health, happiness, and safety. We don't need no education. We don't need no thought control. It has nothing to do with the shootings in our schools. It comes from Britain. It comes from Roger Waters. Selling entertainment, selling that he is a form of education for the estranged, and yet unable to cooperate. Unable to do anything but prank and hybrid zania. Terrorize. That's what his assertive personality is to do terror. When the Harcourt mentioned Joni Mitchell, that she was one of the infant terribles of Roger Waters pounding around the stage um, of The Wall when it was performed on tape. If I had thought Roger Waters, I would have said, "Hey, wow, man, why don't you tell Roger Waters I said hello?" Didn't occur to me. Why didn't I talk to you, Sandor? Was because I didn't want to impose on them. They're like, yeah, 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 yeah. What the hell are you doing in here? What the hell are you doing in here? Get out of here! While calling me on the phone saying, "I love you, man," etc. or giving me phone numbers and getting back to me with those kinds of messages. I appreciate that we need biodiversity in our schools. I appreciate that we need to cut back on fossil fuels. I have always been interested in Buckminster Fuller and books like Who Speaks for the Earth with Thor Heyerdahl. But I'm not canny when it comes to hidden puns, as Gabriel calls them. I didn't hear I would rather haughty. Haughty with one of Thor's Heyerdahls. I don't, because it, I don't think that way. When I told Wesley Podsvar about Ronnie Zazinski and Kasparowski, I didn't think these are like Ronnie and Casper of Reagan and Weinberger, but he obviously saw it. He had the state troopers in hysterics pulling in and out of the chancellery. You would like to think these experienced so called traditionalists mean at least well enough to see us get along, to make decent minded treaties, to protect the earth's resources, to save the poor while they gurgle from their cauldrons of higher order qualities of life on their wow islands. But you don't see me saying, "Get me a hottie from Wow Island. Get me a hottie from Wow Island." I simply didn't understand what was going on. And I was curious to find out if I interacted with the minds of the music and art that I was most affected by, which was just King Crimson and Genesis and to some extent Van der Graaf. I might be able to find my own voice in poetry, which predates my understanding of those people or even awareness of that they existed. The days when I would read Edgar Allan Poe when I was 9 years old, memorizing the Raven. Once upon a midnight dreary, while I pondered weak and weary over many quaint, curious volumes of forgotten lore. There I nodded, nearly napping. Suddenly there came a tapping, as if someone was gently rapping a chamber door. Ah, distinctly I remember it was in the bleak December, and each sacred dying ember wrought its ghost upon the floor. Eagerly I wished the morrow, vainly I had sought to borrow from the books surceased with sorrow, sorrow for the lost Lenore, for the rare and radiant maiden whom the angels name Lenore, nameless here forevermore. And the silken, sad, uncertain rustling of each purple curtain thrilled me, filled me with fantastic terrors never known before. I don't mean you any harm. I don't have any weapons here. I have my hat collection, pictures of that beautiful Greta, painting on the wall, some shirts, some hats. I have my rights as a citizen. If you send me a check, it goes in my bank account. I decide what goes, where it goes, and to who. Somebody sends me my name on a court document and the date I show up. I do resist thieves on the street, and I do help people who are down and out. And I do understand the problems of Hollywood. And I have been molested very brutally and tortured. But it doesn't change the equation very much. I'm just a poet. I'm not Faust running around trying to justify my involvement with Adolf Disney gang. Far from it. I'm doing the opposite. I've gone to school and incurred debts and Parkinson's from abuse, trying to document the problems that have come down the highway from the entertainment system that promotes violence because I think it's wrong-headed and it's affecting where we're heading as a species. You can't see the connection between that. You think it's stupid to look for some way that people could get along with each other, to behave more compassionately and honorably towards one another, to teach children what the reaction formations are and the circuits that club you up and form fight clubs. You think it's safe and dignified to terrorize people online with threats and hostile ideas about their personalities when they're just trying to express their opinions and you have no suitable review of how to cope with the problems that have been put into spin by this sort of um, native authoritarian. That people have native authority pulling this stuff. I mean, I don't know how I came to be interesting to people who are old boy World War II veterans, except that I understand how some of them must feel. That's all. And I can understand how it feels to be present amidst people who have more power than you and not knowing what to say or how to do to make sure that they remain sensible and to see it all fall apart in the hands of desperados who get on high, who play act that there's some kind of elite god of warriors who must prove his mettle to the youngsters so they remain in awe. Must feel like purpose and reason has. I don't know why they say gone south. I think that's how they put it. Where's the magic wand that allows these native authorities to just do like this here and say that a crime has been committed because a child doesn't understand that a crime has been committed. A crime has been committed because a child didn't understand that a crime had been committed. And that's the case. Federal judge says, woof. Muhammad Ali says, woof. George Bush says, woof. Obama says, wooshky dooshy doosh, because he's Obama. A crime has been committed because a child didn't know that a crime has been committed. Woof! Louis Lapham consecrates it. Consecrated. I don't understand how you can um, think well of yourselves when you encourage such. unimaginative destructiveness.